Java, the birthplace of Nahdlatul Ulama. This is not the exact city. The city is not the birthplace of Nahdlatul Ulama, but it is the heartland of Javanese culture and Javanese civilization. So immediately, rather than talk, I'm going to turn things over to the founding chairman of the R20, Kiai Haji Yahya.
Thank you, Paula. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to Yogyakarta. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have a more relaxed program here and hopefully also more fun. We'll visit various interesting places and also have some entertainment. So overall, the Yogyakarta program is meant to be something casual compared to what we had in Bali. So these sessions are also, we're going to have another one maybe tomorrow, I think. It's also going to be a more relaxed conversation among us. Ladies and gentlemen, Nahdlatul Ulama developed the idea of having the R20 Forum with the intention to make it something attached to the G20 Forum and to have it annually from one G20 Forum to another. That's why we name it R20. So when we think about to have this conference as an annual program, then we also thought about how to structure something that will manage the execution of this annual program in a more organized manner. So then, Nahdlatul Ulama decided to have another organization which actually also is tied and connected to Nahdlatul Ulama, which is the Center for Shared Civilizational Values. This is an organization that was founded in the United States of America, in North Carolina, by the leaders of Nahdlatul Ulama. The chairman is His Eminence Kiai Haji Ahmad Mustafa Bisri, former chairman of Nahdlatul Ulama Supreme Council. And in the board of directors, we have Charles Holland Taylor here, and me, and Timothy Samuel Shah, and the current Indonesian Minister of Religious Affairs, Yakut Khairul Qomas. We have also a North Carolinian businessman, Gordon Haynes, and some others. In this organization, the CSCV, we also already have quite many prominent figures joining in our board of advisors. Many of them are among us, like Professor Marianne Clinton here, and some others. So Nahdlatul Ulama decided to give the responsibility to manage the continuing execution of annual R20 to the Center for Shared Civilizational Values by making the CSCV as the permanent secretariat of the R20. So, and it was a decision made in last May in an official structure of collaboration as two different and separate organizations, Nahdlatul Ulama and the Center for Shared Civilizational Values. Thank you. I'm sorry for that. So, the structure of, the initial structure of the management of the R20 as a annual event is already there, established between Nahdlatul Ulama and the Center for Shared Civilizational Values. And then after that, we continue working to have the government of Republic Indonesia to put the agenda of R20 into the official agenda of G20 Forum as one of the side events, but it's official. And we managed to have the Indonesian government to do that and put the R20 agenda into the official website of G20. So you can find the R20 in the official website of the G20 Forum. And later on will come Sheikh Abdurrahman Al-Khayyat of Muslim World League. Later on, we engage with Muslim World League. We discuss about the possibility of collaboration with the Muslim World League in doing the event, and we reached agreement between Nahdlatul Ulama and Muslim World League, and so here we are. We have this, and I would say that I'm very happy that the Bali event went quite well. I hope you also happy with what we did in Bali last 2 days. So, but we also want this to be something that will involve more and more people. So we want all of you, we invite all of you to join us in developing this R20 initiative into something that will be more and more, that will be, more and more stronger, more and more significant in the global dynamics, so that our ideals about how religion can contribute to the global dynamics, to the global economic and political dynamics by offering to infuse religious, spiritual, and noble values into global political and economic power structure will come into realization. We understand that this is a huge job, and it's going to take very, very hard works going forward. That's why we need all help that we can get. So like I mentioned in the closing ceremony in Bali, we want to make a universal call on this endeavor, and we will engage whoever answers the call. What we want is for religions to achieve a mutual understandings that is valid and realistic about the nature of problems that exist between different religions in reality. That's why from the beginning we encourage honest conversation between us and taking account of the reality. Our purpose with this is to have a settlement, to try to work for a settlement among different religions, so that the problems, between religions that we still have and keep having it in reality will eventually be put to end. And if we can achieve that, then religion can be a very strong, sufficiently strong moral position to offer more to the world with noble and spiritual values. So after the 2 days conference that we had in Bali, Nahdlatul Ulama, together with the Muslim World League, with Center for Shared Civilization Values, with representative from Indonesian government, are working on a communique about the Bali conference, about the R20. So it's a communique, meaning something that's describe what's going on and highlight what we consider as important from what happened in the 2 days conference in Bali. We managed to complete the communique. We will submit that communique to the Indonesian government as a report and also put it in publication. The report to the Indonesian government as important because we are also working on to have the Indonesian government, hopefully, in the G20 forum to make a move so that G20 forum would adopt the R20 as one of its official engagement groups. You know, in G20 forum, they have various engagement groups, official engagement groups like Women 20, Youth 20, and so forth. And there are so many other initiatives struggling to be adopted as official engagement groups also. Now we are also working our best to have the Indonesian government to make a move in the G20 forum to adopt the R20 to be the official engagement group of the G20. If we succeed in getting the G20 adopt the R20 forum as the official engagement group, that will guarantee that R20 will be there in every G20 forums, from year to year, from one presidency to another. We have already a strong commitment from our Indian brothers and sisters, a strong commitment to have and host another R20 forum next year in India under the Indian presidency of G20 forum. And we are also already start communication with our friends in Brazil to have another R20 the following year. So if we again we succeed to get the G20 forum adopt the R20 as official engagement group, then there will be R20 forum every year forward. And this will be something that would bind us together to continue our works together towards the ideals that we share regarding how religion should function in our current 21st century reality. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, again, thank you for joining us, and we would like to take the opportunity this afternoon to consult with you, to have your suggestions about what would be possible for us to move forward after what we achieve after the 2 days conference in Bali. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Pak Yaya. We have sitting with Pak Yaya to his left. Pak Yaya likes to joke that he has 3 tailors in his life. One of them is me, Holland Taylor from the United States. Another is retired Lieutenant General Luhut Panjaitan, who is the coordinating minister for maritime affairs and investment in Indonesia. His name means tailor. And the gentleman to our left is Sheikh Al Hayat, who is also a tailor. So, as Sheikh Al-Hayat says, when we meet, this is the senior member of the Taylor family here. So we would invite Sheikh Al-Hayat to give some opening remarks.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. فضيلة الأخ الدكتور الشيخ يحيى خليل ستاغوف، أصحاب المعالي والسماحة والسعادة، الإخوة الحضور، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بداية أتأسف عن تأخري في الحضور لاستلامي حقيبة ملابسي متأخرا بعض الوقت، وبالتالي استغرق بعض الوقت لأكوي الملابس وأكون جاهز، ثم ها أنا أمامكم. نحمد الله أن نجتمع في هذا اليوم المبارك، وهو يوم الجمعة، وهو يوم مبارك في هذه المدينة الجميلة يوغياكارتا. ونحن سعداء بهذا الحضور المميز وما تم فيه من طروحات ونقاشات ولقاءات مثمرة. وباسم أمين عام رابطة العالم الإسلامي معالي الشيخ الدكتور محمد عبد الكريم عيسى، أتمنى لكم كل التوفيق والتطلع إلى لقائكم قريبا إن شاء الله في الهند. ليس لدي مزيد من الموضوع، ولكن أتمنى أن تتكلل لقاءاتنا ولقاءنا هذا بالنجاح، وأن تكون هناك إن شاء الله تباين في الآراء، وبإذن الله تعالى نكون كما تطلع الدكتور الأخ يحيى أن يكون هناك مشاركات أكبر في الأيام القادمة أو في الاجتماعات إن شاء الله في الهند والبرازيل. وتمنياتي للجميع بالتوفيق وإقامة سعيدة في يوغياكارتا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Now we would like to share with you the communique that will be published in English, in Indonesian, and in Arabic, and as Pak Yaya said, will be submitted to the Indonesian government, whose representative has already reviewed the text and will then hopefully subsequently be submitted to the G20, hopefully, by the Indonesian government. So we'd like for Timothy Shaw, the Director of Strategic Initiatives and board member of the Center for Shared Civilization Values, to read that communique.
It is my high honor and distinct pleasure to read the text of our R20 Bali communique. Final communique of the G20 Religion Forum R20, striving to ensure that religion functions as a source of global solutions. We, religious leaders from G20 member states and elsewhere throughout the world, are deeply concerned by global challenges such as environmental degradation, natural and man-made disasters, poverty, unemployment, displaced persons, extremism, and terrorism. Effectively responding to these challenges has been rendered more difficult by rivalry between and among major powers and the resurgence of identity-based conflict worldwide, which threatens both domestic and international peace and security, as well as by the erosion of public commitment to ethical and spiritual values that are essential to the well-being of individuals and societies. In response to these challenges, we have gathered in Bali, Indonesia, for the first G20 Religion Forum, R20, on 2 to 3 November 2022, co-chaired by Kiai Haji Yahya Khalil Stakuf and His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Karim Al Isa. The R20 seeks to promote mutual understanding, a culture of peace, and harmonious coexistence among the world's diverse peoples, religions, and nations. In pursuit of this objective, the R20 is mobilizing religious, social, economic, and political leaders from throughout the world to ensure that religion functions as a genuine and dynamic source of solutions rather than problems. The R20 welcomes and appreciates constructive endeavors to achieve the aforementioned goals, including, but not limited to, A, the establishment in June 2021 of the Center for Shared Civilizational Values by Nahdlatul Ulama spiritual leaders, including the founding chairman of the R20 and general chairman of the Nahdlatul Ulama Central Board, Kiai Haji Yahya Khalil Stakov. And B, the Forum for Building Bridges Between East and West and the 2019 Makkah Charter, initiatives established by the Muslim World League under the leadership of His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Karim Al Isa, Secretary General of the Muslim World League, in order to foster mutual understanding, peaceful coexistence, and harmony among the world's diverse peoples, cultures, and nations. Therefore, the R20 calls upon religious and political leaders and people of goodwill of every faith and nation to join in building a global alliance founded upon shared civilizational values. The R20, through this global alliance, seeks to, 1, develop and implement concrete initiatives that will build bridges between nations and civilizations. 2, encourage honest and realistic conversation within and between religious communities in order to ensure that religion functions as a genuine and dynamic source of solutions rather than problems. 3, infuse the world's social, political, and economic power structures with moral and spiritual values. 4, prevent the political weaponization of identity. 5, curtail the spread of communal hatred. 6, promote solidarity and respect among the diverse peoples, cultures, and nations of the world. 7, safeguard human beings from violence and suffering precipitated by conflict. 8, call upon the world to actively assist those who are suffering the consequences of such violence. 9, harness the wisdom of spiritual ecology embedded within the world's religious traditions to ensure respect for and preservation of the natural environment, including the elements of earth, air, and water. 10, foster the emergence of a truly just and harmonious world order founded upon respect for the equal rights and dignity of every human being. And 11, secure recognition of the R20 as an official G20 engagement group. And then finally, having launched the R20 under the 2022 Indonesian presidency of the G20, we look forward to India's presidency of the G20 in 2023. Bali, Indonesia, 3 November 2022.
Thank you, Tim. Before we open this to some discussion, I'll also mention a few housekeeping items. We will have another planning session tomorrow morning that will begin at 9:30 a.m. Today, we're not going to go too intense. We've had a very intense time in Bali, and we have an entertaining schedule for all of you. And there's going to be this evening 2 gala dinners. There'll be one gala dinner at what is known here in Yogyakarta as the Kraton, the palace. The Sultan. Yogyakarta is a special administrative district within the Republic of Indonesia. At the time of the independence war against the Dutch, the Sultan of Yogyakarta was one of the key figures supporting the independence movement. He had an economic and a power base and a physical base from which to lend support to the Indonesian revolution. And when Indonesia became an independent state and the Republic of Indonesia, the position of the Sultan of Yogyakarta was recognized on a permanent basis by the Indonesian government. And so the Sultan is both a traditional ruler and simultaneously the governor of Yogyakarta, and he has a palace. He is going to be entertaining tonight, the R20. Unfortunately, they don't have enough seats for everyone who might ideally like to go. And so we've invited certain people from various member states of the G20. For those who are not invited, we don't want you to feel in any way left out, so we're going to have a gala dinner right here at the Hyatt. And I will be with you here at the Hyatt. And we will have entertainment in classical Javanese, dance, the Ramayana. So for our Indian colleagues, you may or may, I think Swami Mitrananda already knows, since he's been here to Indonesia many times, one of the primary cultural icons and sources of education and morality, and values of life is actually stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata from India, which are performed both through dance and through shadow puppet theater. So we will have, after 6:30, 7 o'clock, those who are going to the Kraton will meet at the lobby where you came down from your buses, and we'll be going to the Kraton at 6:30, departing for the Kraton, and those of us staying here, we will have dinner and the shadow puppet, well, not the shadow puppet, we'll have the live Wayang Wong, which is the Wayang for human dancers. Then another, as I said, session 2 of this planning discussion will occur tomorrow morning. We'll assemble at 9:30 a.m. We'll speak for 2.5 hours. Then tomorrow afternoon, we will depart for, and I might as well just going to give you a rundown so you have an idea here. No, it might be that not everyone has heard what we're going to be doing. As I say, we don't want too intense a schedule. We've had an opportunity to think and speak quite a bit in Bali. But tomorrow afternoon, first thing that we will do is go to visit something called Universitas Islam Indonesia. It's Islamic University of Indonesia on the slopes of Mount Merapi, one of the most active volcanoes on Earth, a few kilometers from here. Actually, we are on the slopes of Mount Merapi, but it's calm at the moment, so everything is fine. But literally, well, I won't get diverted into anecdotes, but the nature of the volcanic ash is that it tends to bury things, and they can get buried under quite a bit of ash. And when the Islamic University of Indonesia was excavating in order to build a new library, modern library, the excavation equipment hit stone. And so they called geologists from the University of Gajah Mada, and they started digging and see, well, what do we have here? And they found a Shiva temple with a statue, with a lingam, a yoni, with a statue of Nandi, the bull on which Shiva rides. And they then had to consult, what are we going to do? Because this is right in the middle of the library where we're going to build. And so the university, in consultation with archaeologists, decided to redesign the library. And they built the library in a U shape to cradle this temple. And the temple is now at the center of the Islamic University of Indonesia, preserved as an archaeological monument. And we think that this is an interesting thing that you might like to see. And that includes countries where Muslims are in the majority, might give thought as to how to treat minorities, but also where Muslims are in the minority. It's also interesting, how do we treat Muslims? So we think this is an interesting thing that you'd like to see. I believe the rector of the university will be there to greet us. After that, we'll be going to Prambanan Temple. It's a 1,000, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. We'll be going to Prambanan Temple. It's a 1,150-year-old Hindu temple with certain Buddhist syncretic elements that you will see. And it is a complex, actually, of 1,000 temples that recently. There's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In February of this year, the Honorable Kiai Haji Yakut Holos Kumas, who is the Minister of Religious Affairs, and Pat Yaya's brother, together with the governor of Yogyakarta, restored active Hindu worship to the temple of Prambanan. And this is something which, again, we think is significant. It's interesting to go to Prambanan as an archaeological site, but it's even more interesting to go to Prambanan as a living site of Hindu worship. So you have a country with the largest Muslim majority population in the world, and a Minister of Religious Affairs who's Muslim, restoring active Hindu worship to this temple. And we will both be visiting the temple, but we've arranged for the Director General of the Indonesian Ministry of Religious Affairs to be there with local Hindus and Hindu priests. And then Swami Mitrananda and other Hindus that are with us will be engaged in Hindu ritual worship at this site. And hopefully invoking a blessing, Swami, on all of our endeavors that we undertake together. And then we will be having dinner out near Prambanan. We can pray for good weather. We're just entering the rainy season. But there will be cultural performance and dinner in the, you could say, in the shadow of Prambanan Temple, with cultural and artistic performance from a variety of cultural and religious traditions here in Indonesia. The next morning, I mentioned that we would be having a planning session here. And then tomorrow, well, that's actually, that was tomorrow. All of that was tomorrow. The following day is Sunday. Life's going to go quick here, and before we know it, we're going to be saying goodbye. On Sunday morning, for anyone who wants to, and that includes everyone who wants to, we'll have buses to take you to Borobudur, which is about an hour and 15 minutes northwest of here. Borobudur Temple is a 1,200-year-old Buddhist site. And it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And like with Prambanan, the Indonesian government has restored active Buddhist worship at Prambanan, at Borobudur Temple. Very interesting, located near Borobudur Temple is a building called Mendut. It's another temple at Mendut, in a village called Mendut. And then there is an active Buddhist monastery at Mendut that we will visit on our way to Borobudur Temple. So you'll be able to see simultaneously 1,200-year-old UNESCO World Heritage Sites that were Buddhist in the Mahayana tradition, and then a living, active Theravada Buddhist monastery in the region, which is protected by the local villagers. I live there. I live 3 kilometers from Borobudur Temple. Every society has its challenges, and Indonesia is one of those societies that has challenges. And quick anecdote, when the problems were occurring very seriously in Myanmar related to ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Buddhists, that brought about certain disturbances here in Indonesia among Muslims who felt a feeling of brotherhood, naturally, with Rohingya Muslims, but it was also significantly agitated by the fact that it was in the run-up to Indonesia's 2019 national elections. And there were people who might like to take advantage of this issue for political purposes. And so I was out visiting Bante Sri Panivaro, a good friend of mine, who is the head of the monastery in Mendut. And I came out of the temple. There were 5 trucks, 6 trucks full of Brimob. Brimob is the Indonesian riot police who have automatic weapons and are prepared for any occasion. And these 5 trucks came up and were parking next to banyan trees that are in front of the old temple. And they all got out, and then they were practicing in the yards of Mendut Temple, not the living Buddhist monastery, but the old temple. And then I noticed that the driver of one of the trucks pulled out into the street and then backed in and pulled out and backed in. And I noticed that he was practicing how to pull his truck into the street in order to block the road that was going to Borobudur through that traffic lane. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And then I spoke to the Brimob people, and I saw that they had all come from eastern Central Java. And I spoke to them. I said, what are you doing here? And I said, Assalamu alaikum. And they said, wa alaikum salam. They were all Muslim. I said, what are you doing here? They said, We are here to defend our fellow citizens. We are here to defend our fellow citizens. And this is a person who's maybe a corporal in Bremont, and he knows this. He knows that it's his job to protect Buddhists. He knows that it's his job to protect Christians, Catholics, Protestants, Hindus. And this is something that we think that you might be interested in knowing. We think that we would be so bold as to say it might be a model for certain parts of the world that are afflicted by religious conflict. And I say that it's not that we're free of religious conflict, but the tradition in Indonesia is to deal with religious conflict and try to manage religious conflict. We will then go to Borobudur Temple and have lunch at Plataran, and then come back here, and in the evening, we will go to an Islamic boarding school, Pondok Pesantren Pandanaran. I think it'll be very interesting. It'll be the final event of your stay here, and final formal event of your stay here. There'll be about 5,000 young students from the boarding school who will welcome you. And it will be an experience. A few of you have already experienced this. James Dorsey, who's back here in the tan jacket, has been there. Pat Cesar has been there. A number of people have been there. When James Dorsey went and he looked at it several years ago and he said, "This is a very frightening experience." But he said, "There's 5,000 people here on Pat Yaya's command would march and do anything Pat Yaya tells them to do," which is true. But the fortunate thing is Pat Yaya would only tell them to do something good. So that will be the concluding experience. That's our housekeeping here, and I just want to make you alert so that you're aware when buses are leaving and so forth. Then back to the subject at hand. Pat Yaya is very well placed in Indonesian society. The government of Indonesia has viewed very favorably the establishment of the R20 this year. The R20 in Indonesia this year is actually recognized as a main event here in Indonesia. We initially anticipated it would be a side event, but the Indonesian government elevated it to a main event. And we are preparing for next year in India. You may have noticed on the stage in Bali, there was a handover ceremony, and Swami Mitrananda and Swami Bhadresh Das, who's not with us, but who is here in the hotel, and Swami Govindra Dev Giri Maharaj. These are very, 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 very prominent Hindu leaders in India, and we're very honored to have all of them with us, including you, Swamiji. They will be in the position next year of receiving the R20 in India. I understand it's quite likely that the event will be held in Kanchipuram, the site of one of the Shankaracharya Peeths, or Shankaracharya Mas. This is the four sites established by Adi Shankara thousands of years ago to preserve Hinduism. And this represents you could say, the high elite form of preserving and perpetuating the teaching of Hinduism. And both the Indian government and civil society have decided that the people who received this flag would be the people who will carry forward the R20 next year. So it'll be very deeply embedded within the society itself, just like by virtue of Nahdlatul Ulama hosting the R20 this year. It has a tremendous effect socially, culturally, religiously in Indonesia. We're fortunate, maybe it's a divine blessing, that when the idea came up to establish the R20, Pat Yaya decided to do this. It was first held in the world's largest Muslim majority country. Next year in the world's largest Hindu majority country. And we anticipate the year after in the world's largest Catholic majority country, with a rising Protestant population as well, Brazil, following that in South Africa. So it's going to be in 4 countries, all of which have cultural, religious expressions that very much belong on the world stage, having a seat at the table of discussion and decision-making, where the world's geopolitical and economic elites are in many ways shaping the future of humanity. So having said that, and before we open to the discussion and request for input, I will just say that we're planning on moving forward with various work streams, and you could see some of these on display from the various panels that were held in Bali. There were several panels, and just to go over them here for you. The first concerned identifying and embracing values shared by the world's major religions and civilizations. In other words, in Pat Yaya's terminology, what is it we share in common? What can we actually agree upon that we already agree upon that can serve as a basis for moving forward in solidarity? Now, in some cases, there may be values that we do agree upon but have not yet been extended mutually to one another. And this is something that's very important because many religious communities have been exclusivists and have dictated one mode of moral conduct for one another, but not necessarily for those who belong to a different community. But nonetheless, there may be these values that we share in common, and if we can extend these values to other communities, then this would be certainly an existing basis for a deep establishment of trust and cooperation. The second work stream we anticipate relates to historical grievances, truth-telling, reconciliation, and forgiveness. The lady at the end of this table here, Jacqueline Rivers, is married to a very fascinating gentleman, Gene Rivers, who is with the Church of God in Christ. It's an African-American Pentecostal organization with 6 million followers. Jackie herself, you heard her in Bali, you already know about her. But Gene, as he put it, we consulted with many of you in the run-up to this meeting in planning for your presentations. But Gene was not on the panel. He unfortunately got COVID and could not come, but as he put it, in order to have reconciliation, if you have historical grievances and you get to truth-telling without agape, in Christian terminology without love, in Islamic terminology without rahmah, truth-telling without love and compassion can just lead to the weaponization and further victimization of others in armed conflict or civil conflict. So really there's a hidden nuance there of historical grievances, truth-telling, reconciliation, forgiveness. And the framework here that we're putting on the table for discussion concerns how to go about this and as Pat Yaya, you noticed there were various speakers in that session. Swapan Dasgupta was in the session, and Tariq Mansour, and I think Jackie Rivers was in that session. So there's a question of how do we go about this? It's essential to be truthful. The Nahdlatul Ulama is noted for its truth-telling, but then that truth-telling ultimately needs to lead to new ways of engaging with one another. And for this purpose, I'll just talk about, maybe bring it to the first session, which Marianne Glendon provided a keynote address. That is the session on identifying and embracing values shared by the world's major religions and civilizations. But I went to the next one just to say that we're thinking of various work streams and talking about, I'll just speak to two of those work streams in order to open up a discussion here. It's our belief that we need initially, in the first stages of building the R20, we need to focus on principles. We need to focus on values. It's our perception that very often in the world today, religion is instrumentalized. As Pat Yaya has said, if we're going to bring religion to the G20, we better first and foremost make sure we're not bringing the problems that are resident within religious communities. We need to bring solutions. And we have to be honest about the problems. That's why you could see from the discussions in Bali, there was some very serious, Alan Brill, Sylvina Chemin, we're talking about very deep things, as were Ulil Abshar Abdallah and Pat Yaya. And so we need to, there's a tendency and a predisposition, because so much discourse today is occurring in media and in circumstances that are dominated by secularism. And secularism tends to utilize the brain. And if we were to look at, to the extent we believe that there are crises in the world, for example, crises emerging as a result of technology, or the use of technology, it's obvious that nuclear weapons were developed as a result of the human brain. But the human brain is only partial, it's not holistic. The human brain is not the sum totality of the soul. The soul is resident within every human being. But if the brain is acting in a manner that's divorced from a soul that is alive, and a soul that feels God's divine grace, and a soul that is seeing others with the eye of compassion, then the mind can develop technology or use technology in ways that are destructive rather than constructive, or maybe of mixed use, we could say. And also, the mind is, can be very devious in how it leads people. Because we know if we were to talk about the problems that exist within religion, we talk about dogma. All of us here may have our own dogma. And it's just human nature to tend to dogmatize things. But we may not agree with each other's dogmas. And for various obvious reasons, that we don't agree with one another's dogmas. We're also thinking that it may be best not to talk about our dogmas because we tend to know each other's dogmas and we can leave it at that. But the reality of life is that dogma, if you look, Yahya several years ago, educated me about the nature of tyranny from the perspective of Islam. And when he had educated me about the nature of tyranny from the perspective of Islam, he created a unified field theory, namely the idea that human beings as individual souls tend to tyrannize themselves by yielding to passion and ego. And so therefore, most human beings are not in control of themselves, so they're simply tyrannized by their base passions or ego and so forth. But then when such individuals have power over other human beings, they tend to either induce them with carrots or beat them with sticks in order to get other human beings to comply. What's that?
If there's only would be sticks.
And this is where dogma comes in, because dogma is a very useful tool combined with political power, economic power, and technology to compel compliance with the agenda of those who have a specific self-interested agenda. So the R20, we're thinking very deeply about these things. We're discussing very deeply about these things. The reason we're looking for identifying shared values, and this is why in a moment I'm going to turn to you, Marianne, because Marianne, well, I'll introduce you in just a moment, but I'm talking here about focusing on principles because human nature is such that it's not just religions that can be dogmatic. We know that this Bolshevik revolution, that communism can be dogmatic. Anything can be dogmatic. Human beings who are secular can be dogmatic and seek to compel compliance with whatever dogma is popular in that particular day and time. And so we're thinking, and human beings have a natural tendency to conflate principle with dogma. And I'll just give you one example, I'll move to a second. First example I'll give you is the sanctity of life. Almost everyone here around this table would probably agree on the sanctity of life, but we probably would not agree on what policies are necessary in order to protect the sanctity of life. People, for example, from Europe may very often believe that the sanctity of life requires forbidding the death penalty. But people from other parts of the world may feel that the sanctity of life requires the death penalty. If someone takes life without cause, then one's own life would be forfeit for taking another life, which is sacred, without cause. So my point in saying this is that people can dogmatize the policy when there's an agreement on the principle. And I think that this is a very, very, we feel that this is a very important point because rather than sit around a table with everyone here and argue about policy, we'd like to first try to establish what principles would link us and bind us together, and we'll have plenty of time in future years to move towards work streams and see how shared principles could lead eventually to discussions of policies that we might wish to recommend. But we're trying to be modest in what we're accomplishing this year. One, we're trying to accomplish establishing the R20 on a firm basis. And what the Indonesian government sees is that we had an event in Bali where we had representatives from 18 of the 20 G20 member states. China sent a contribution, 3 contributions for consideration, but their delegates were not able to come because of China's COVID lockdown policy. The only country that did not come was South Korea, but that was simply because we didn't have time to arrange it. It has nothing to do with any reluctance of the South Korean government itself. So we're in good shape. We're seeking to establish the R20, move to the R20 becoming a formal engagement group. We will also establish a board within the Center for Shared Civilizational Values and have representatives from the 20 G20 member states. Again, we're having consultations. I should mention that the Muslim World League has on staff expert in G20 engagement groups. We have from the Indonesian Ministry of Religious Affairs, the people who are the experts this year on the G20 engagement group. And then for all of you who are in the room, where we're going, what we're looking at is having membership on the board of advisors of the secretariat of the G20, of the R20, people from every member state, and then hopefully people who, not exclusively, but then people who are from the majority religion in that country. This is something that the countries are thinking about. Now, there might be a challenge in some countries where religion is almost disappearing. But nonetheless, we have to also work within the framework of the G20 and how the G20 operates. But that doesn't mean we're not interested in minority representation. I have my dear friend Silvina here, who is a rabbi in Argentina. But fortunately, she brought someone, a gentleman who is in Argentina, works with the Conference of Catholic Bishops and is close to the government as well. And so it's the kind of thing, is very dynamic type of engagement. I'm mentioning this so that when Pat Yaya said earlier that we invite you, we wish to engage and work with all of you. That is people who are from G20 member states, people who are not from G20 member states. Again, we know many of you in this room, even though we may have joined just recently. Father Paolo Benanti is from one of the smaller nation states in the world, but also one of the more influential. That is from the Vatican. And he serves on the Pontifical Academy of Life Foundation, Renaissance Foundation, dealing with the issue of artificial intelligence and ethics, and what ethics should guide artificial intelligence. This is another work stream, not the first work stream, but it's a critical work stream. So we will be moving to various work streams, but then I'll also talk about another work stream, and this work stream is thanks to Rabbi Arthur Green, who is a very prominent rabbi. We originally were thinking of not engaging in this issue for the very frank reason that the issue of the environment just tends to be very polarizing and also very subject to people's policy prescriptions. But Art Green, as a rabbi, he was originally from the Masorti tradition, then was was involved in the founding of the Reconstructionist tradition. He founded the Hebrew College Rabbinical School. He's a neo-Kabbalist. He's a mystic, a Jewish mystic, and he created an article or a chapter for a book published by Yale University Press, which we read sections to you. That is, Timothy read it at the near the closing, at the last speech in the spiritual ecology session that we had yesterday in Bali, and he's talking about. And all of us, this is something we're very much interested in exploring. We've had this discussion with Swami Mitrananda, who was on that panel, and with the Indian delegation. We believe that every religion in the world, every religion and every tradition that predates the modern age has a very deep tradition of spiritual ecology. And they may express it differently, but there's great commonalities. We have discussed this with the Muslim World League in terms of the relationship with water. We had a ceremony in Bali before the R20 two-day summit started, where Sheikh Al-Isa and Swami Bhadresh Das from India planted trees together, and they were sacred Hindu trees. 20 trees regarded as sacred within Hinduism, and there was a Hindu ceremony conducted in a Hindu temple in Bali in order to clean the energy of these trees and then invoke divine blessing for the planting of these trees. And the belief within the Hindu cosmogony is that this will help to reestablish balance in the relationship between heaven and earth and the individual and the divine. So what we're looking at here is the elements within every religious tradition that connect the individual with the divine, or individual with our fellow human beings, individuals with animals, individuals with the earth. And every religion has its own way of understanding this, and we're interested in exploring this from a point of view of principles and excavating these principles before we advance to policy, because it's inevitable on any issue that's political. As soon as you go to policy, you're going to get conflict. And we can almost guarantee that among us in this room, we'd get into conflict on issues of policy. So I'm raising a question. This is what we'd like to discuss, and we're not going to go long today, but I would like to raise this question to Mary Ann, and I put it in the context. Mary Ann's an expert on international law, as you may know, the learned hand emerita, learned hand professor of law at Harvard Law School. Barack Obama was one of her students. Mike Pompeo was another of her students. When Mike Pompeo was in Indonesia, he bowed to Mary Ann, as Pat Yaya said, like we would bow to a Muslim leader. The Secretary of State of the United States bowed to Mary Ann Glendon. And she is an expert in the processes that led to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and how various parties, such as those of us gathered in this room, proceeded to create a document that shaped human history. And so the question I'd like to pose is, do those of us in this room agree that initially it would be acceptable and wise to think about principle and find a shared basis on principles before we start moving work streams in next year and beyond into actual policy, because we would like to establish a feeling of trust and solidarity among all of us before we start moving. And we'll deal with many difficult issues, right? Difficult issues, but difficult issues related to principle, perhaps, rather than policy. So that's a proposal we have. I'd like to know Mary Ann's view of this, and others who would like to intervene. We'd like to know your views as well. Let's see if this is working now. Let's get that one, see if it works. The one not yet. Okay, you can use this here. Mas, ini mudah untuk, okay, punya sana, nanti yang lain bisa paganya, ya. Jika ada narasumber lain, ya. Ya, nanti Anda bisa sana supaya. Thank you.
Well, I think we've already heard a great deal about the ambition of the aspirations, and it's been inspiring to hear from Pak Yahya about the great things that we are all hoping for. And we've also heard a great deal about the magnitude of the challenges to what is hoped for in this R20 meeting and in our discussions about the future. And I'm afraid that what I'm going to say is going to elaborate a bit on the magnitude of the challenges, but it's important for us to reflect on this. There was a moment 75 years ago when the United Nations assigned a group of philosophers and world-famous thinkers, including Gandhi, whom I'm going to quote in a minute. It asked them to study whether there could truly be said to be universally shared values. And the committee was under a good deal of time pressure, but they sent a questionnaire all over the world. And the responses that they received encouraged them that there was enough of a practical agreement on a very few principles that you could go forward with a declaration of rights. But they very honestly said at the end, if you look into this agreement on principles, you will find that it rests on very different foundations. And in fact, Gandhi wrote back, you really should be talking about duties instead of rights. And I think that's something that the world's religions understand very well, and they're the problems when you start articulating the principles in the form of rights. So the critique in philosophical and religious circles on that agreement, it was a historic achievement. It was a wonderful thing, and it did great good in the world. But there has always been a complaint from thoughtful people that was anticipated by the French philosopher Jacques Maritain in 1948 when he said, yes, we agreed on the rights so long as no one asks us why. And what he meant there was that there was an agreement on certain general principles, but no agreement on the foundations of those principles. That's the great defect of the first truly multinational, multicultural attempt to do what we are trying to do afresh and in a more broad-based and deeper way. Now, are we going to find shared foundations for universal rights? Probably not. So the exercise probably will involve finding foundations in each tradition. And if the general principles can be rooted deeply in the world's major philosophical and religious traditions, except for the philosophical tradition of atheism, but we'll leave that aside. If you can find those principles with foundations in Judaism, Hinduism, will go on, you have a chance of going to the next step, which is certainly essential for us, and that is enculturating the principles. Because an agreement at the international level, it's wonderful. An agreement in a group of religious leaders and scholars, that's wonderful. But if principles are going to have any meaning, they are going to have to be brought to life in the capillaries of each of our cultures. And as I think we all know, transformation, true transformation, begins in the heart of every individual. So we're talking about a kind of conversion. And that's the greatness of the ambition of this venture, but it also is the greatness of the challenges that lie ahead. I'd just like to finish up by saying that I think we all have the sense of having seen something important happen here in the past few days, something that potentially could be transformative. And I think that's enough to give us heart and inspiration to try to do this difficult thing. Thank you.
Looks like our dear friend, Archbishop Thomas Schirmacher, has something to add here. I just would like to also introduce Archbishop Schirmacher, that we've been working, Nahdlatul Ulama has been working with the World Evangelical Alliance since 2019. We have a Humanitarian Islam World Evangelical Alliance joint working group, and we regard this R20 endeavor as a joint collaboration, just as we're collaborating on in many other areas. So thank you.
Thank you very much. By the way, I wrote your new book, typing what you said, yeah, so I can send it. And no, I apologize not having a jacket. My suitcase is still missing, so I'm glad that I always have a new bishop's shirt in my travel luggage. I want to underline something, but see it a bit more positive when you spoke about foundational things. Let me take the simple example of human rights. Human dignity and human rights. Our people only will engage for them if they are rooted in their faith, in their religion and worldview. Yeah? So I cannot convince a Muslim to engage for the human dignity of others by arguing with Christian arguments. And arguments, Muslim arguments for human rights will not convince my people. They might interest me in a discussion, but the simple people on the street will not know what we are talking about. Yet, what is the solution? The solution is often to go for a secular version. Who is in the end convinced by the secular version arguments for human rights? Of course, secular people. It's the same there. So we can cooperate, we can say it's wonderful, we can back them, but our people are motivated out of their faith, out of their worldview. Yeah? So what we need to do is really to engage with each other, ask each other, what is the foundation in your faith for doing this? Yeah? And while we are discussing this, and we have a lot of experience in this, as we are friends, even questioning whether this really is valid. Not I don't know, not to do mission in the sense, oh, if you only would be a Christian, then it would be very easy. Yeah? But it resonates, listening to the others, what are your arguments, what are your arguments, what is the history? Why do you think that there are so many people in your religion who do not follow this? Yeah? So I believe that we have to accept that we cannot go for something that is so foundational that it is neither Buddhist or Christian or, yeah, so if we fight for this environment, I'm deeply convinced, I've said this in the UN again and again, we are discussing the future of our planet in the moment. Yeah? We have to be in the middle of the mess. And when we come as religious people into the middle of the mess, we come with our worldviews. Yeah? And I cannot speak for a Muslim worldview on the future of this world, but I can see that in Islam, it's deeply rooted. This is a creation, it belongs to God. We don't have the right to destroy it. We are responsible to the Creator what we do with this creation. And He has given us the rational ability to overcome those problems. Yeah. So I think that by doing this together, we really have to see if, let's take Islam and Christianity, if we now say, oh, it shouldn't be Muslim, it shouldn't be Christian, end up with a vague, I hate to say secular, a vague nothing that doesn't, it will not resonate with any of our people. We might agree on something very vague. Yeah. So, second, the advantage of what R20, of what we're doing here, goes beyond just this intellectual debate. We on the table here have all kinds of religious groups that while we are discussing this cooperation, are doing it in reality already. Yeah? So we can speak about religious freedom and in general, and it's very, I'm happy that we will see here the Muslim majority, the largest Muslim country in the world, protecting other religions, and we all agree definitely that even from the Muslim side, it's different to protect Jews or Christians, which have been close to them somehow since the revelation of the Quran anyway, yeah? Or a religion like Hinduism or Buddhism, which by content, by dogma, really is far from each other. Yeah, so I find this really amazing. But what amazes me also is the pure fact when some years ago there were attacks on Christian churches around here in the country. Your young people went to all the churches on Christmas and stood in front of the churches to protect them. Yeah? That is practicing a joint, and I see this among young people, among your young people, among our young people, among the young people of all the larger and smaller religions here on the table. They want to go for real action and to prove that these are not only some ideas, but reality. At the same time, I was very happy to see when we were at the Nations Mosque in Washington, and some, probably Christians, I don't know, at least put out leaflets saying, that's an evil place and we have to do something about it. And how can they be in the middle of Washington? This is a Christian country and not a Muslim country. Yeah? And we had pastors from our camp that would sleep on the stairs of the mosque all night. So that whoever wanted to go to do something against the mosque would have to step on the pastors and then go there. Yeah? And I think that's the second thing. In our joint experience, we do not need to wait until our top intellectuals, and we have some of our top intellectuals here, you have some of your top, until they have found the last comma and footnote. Yeah? While we are discussing things, we can put this into practice. Yeah? And the central foundational thing really is to prove to each other. We are human beings. We have a human dignity, and let me say this without wanting to start a fight with our non-religious friends in this world, which we want to protect too. Nevertheless, we think that what we think about human dignity goes far beyond just some words and saying you should protect something. Yeah? For us, the human dignity of the human beings really goes to the point in my Christian tradition, the image of God. I mean, that's incredible. Yeah? Every religious tradition has different words for describing this. Yeah? But this is what we have to prove to each other, that just because we see the dignity in every human being, we respect that this dignity includes that he has to make his own choice, what his face what his religious view is. This is part of the dignity, that we are able to make this choice. And so I'm happy to discuss about my choice and listen to others on their choice, but I want to do it on the place, and this is R20, yeah? That people see whatever we do to each other. We see the dignity, we see what we stand for, we see what is the highest authority for us in the face of everybody else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Now, we're not going to want to keep people too long. As I said, that those who are going to the Kraton will need to be prepared to leave at 6:30. I would suggest you be at the lobby at 6:30. We're going to go for another 30 minutes, and then they'll give you well, what time is it? Okay, we're a little early here. My watch is still on Bali time, so we're okay. Right, so we'll go maximum another 30 minutes, but we want to give an opportunity for various people here to respond. I appreciate very much, Marianne, your thoughts, what you shared in framing this. Also, Thomas, thank you very much. And then in order to move forward, what I'd like to do is ask everyone to limit their interventions to 3 minutes. And if I may, Marcella, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much. Then afterwards, our colleague here, who had also raised his hand at the same time. Listen, I wanted to propose the following order of action. It's out of my experience that I told you yesterday of trying to find common positions at European Union negotiations. That it is less difficult to make first the list of questions for which we want an answer than to try to provide answers from which we are all going to respond. So I would be really more able to work and to do everything that we want to achieve, well, almost everything that we want to achieve with this wonderful initiative, if we make a list of the issues that need a position, then put it to discussion to the corresponding working group that can be formed out of the expertise of those present or willing to participate over the course of the year, sort the list of questions according to those working groups, put a deadline, and issue a position per each religious group, because as Marianne was saying, it's really difficult to come up with a common position when we all have something very valuable to bring. So this is a proposal. First, let us try to work these days that we are together in the list of questions and the list of issues for which we want an answer. We are angry and, well, not angry, and nervous every time that there's an issue coming, and we seem to be on the wrong foot, that we seem to be always reactive. But it is not true that we do not know what is coming our way. For the next year, we already know what issues are going to be big. So I think that it would be a great thing if we can make our list of questions for common position, or as common as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. I should also add that Marcella is a Mexican citizen of Mexico, a G20 member state. She lives in Brussels. She works for, I think, Aid to the Church in Need, which, if I'm correct, is an official part of the Roman Catholic Church. And so if I could, in terms of what Marcella is suggesting there, I think it would be valuable, because hopefully we'll all have a chance to be talking here, but again, we'll have to be concise. But I would certainly welcome people to be thinking in terms of what concerns you. This is certainly one of the purposes of the R20, to give voice to the world's religious leaders to express their concerns. Yes, Rabbi Negan.
Conference has opened our hearts to Indonesia, to Nahdlatul, Ulama, to one another. But it's not, as Marianne said before, it's not only ourselves we must transform, but a broken world to heal. And Marianne, you spoke about foundations. One example of foundations we heard afterwards from Bishop Thomas about our common humanity and dignity. I feel an additional foundation that I would add is to every religion has its inner language, inner workings and dynamics of what really creates a dogma of giving true legitimacy and respect to other traditions, not general statements of of tolerance. And I think this is a foundation which is critical, because if we truly give the level that we can of legitimacy to the other and respect, this means their teachings on all issues will be more listened to as depositories of wisdom and divine knowledge. And of course, the outstanding example, to continue our previous speaker from Mexico, who I believe you're Roman Catholic, is the process of Nostra Aetate, which was not merely general statements of tolerance, but a worked out dogma and theology which profoundly changed relations to other religions. I feel we must find in the inner language of each religion to begin each process of a Nostra Aetate, to give the legitimacy and respect so that we could truly listen to one another and listen and learn from one another. And this is a foundation that I would like to add to our common humanity and dignity, which of course is the foundation of all foundations that Professor Thomas mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. I should just mention that what you're proposing is in the work stream related to the need to recontextualize religious teachings. Pak Yahya mentioned that. He mentioned it in Bali. I believe he mentioned it here again this afternoon. Nahdlatul Ulama considers this is certainly one of its primary foci, and we believe it should be at the heart of the R20. Thank you very much. Would others like to intervene and make any? Oh yeah, so please, it's Michael Trainer, I believe. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yes, it is, from Australia. I've just only got two questions. What is our agenda here gathered today? And given the limitation of time, I mean, around the table here, there are so many voices and so many opportunities and so many insights. My question is, what's the process that we are going to use in the limited time that we have to address the agenda, which I need to get a clarity about? And is it to do with the declaration that was read out, which I agree with, but is it to get some response to that declaration? So there are my two questions. What's our agenda and what's our process? Given the limitation of time and the fact that somebody's turning off my microphone.
We're cognizant. First of all, I'll tell you why we decided to bring you here, because that will partly answer your question. We were in Bali because the president of Indonesia wanted to hold the R20 in Bali. And he wanted to hold it in the 2 weeks before the G20 in a sterile zone where it was secure and where also it would be held in the run-up to the actual G20. And so we had a 2-day summit in Bali, and the purpose, we achieved the purpose of that summit, of gathering people, having the discussion that we had, having the contributions that came, laying the foundation, establishing the R20, and then being in a position to move forward to fill all of this out. Now, we have a limited objective here, and if we tell you what our ultimate, our primary objective in bringing you here, our actual real reason for bringing you here is so to introduce you to understand Indonesia. Bali is a majority Hindu island where the population, as Pak Yahya said in his speech in Bali, is a Hindu minority and a Muslim majority, where that Hindu minority is tolerated and respected in its rights. I see what you're saying there, but I'm just telling you, you're asking me the question, I'm telling you the agenda here, okay? I'm telling you the agenda. And I know you're asking about the other, but I'm wanting to frame this. You want to say something?
I do.
Okay,
Thank you,
do.
Holland.
Yeah.
I appreciate that context.
Right.
And I resonate with what we've been involved with in the last 2 days. I fully support it. I think it's been fantastic. I think some of us around the table here might have some feedback on that.
Okay.
Which I would be hoping you'd like to get some feedback on.
Yes.
But secondly, what is the agenda here now for us gathered around this table before we What is it that you want us to go away with before we leave this place?
This
back
place.
to our countries.
Right, and that's back to my issue. What we really would like you to leave with when you leave this place is it's going to take much more time than we have sitting around a table for 1.5 hours today and 2.5 hours tomorrow morning. Now, we could have you sit around a table the whole time you're here, but that's not why we brought you here. We brought you here in order to experience Javanese civilization. That's why we brought you here. That's the agenda. Excuse me? Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yes, like I said before that, we already created a structure of, let's say, management of how we move forward from this R20. And we are aware that it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy path for us. And we will need as much or as many of ideas that we can get from friends and whoever is willing to work with us about how we would move forward. So this is just a very, very beginning of everything. So what we are thinking is that after this, the Center for Shared Civilizational Values will work to create something for us to engage more. Because like I explained before, that Nahdlatul Ulama already gave the task to execute the follow-up of this R20 and to make the the work move forward. So what we need from you, what we expect from you this afternoon in this room is suggestions from you, but what we can do, ideas from you. And these ideas will be processed within the Center for Shared Civilizational Values. And we intend to create another platform, another meeting, to invite you again to work more with us on this. So, like I said, this Jogja program is supposed to be something more relaxed, something that you can enjoy more without too much distress. We do not intend to find something that something that will be like a serious institutional decision, something like that. Not yet. This is just very, very beginning of, very beginning of everything, And we don't want to squeeze your energy into that kind of serious thing here in Jogja, We want you to enjoy more. So that's why also, but the communique is not, it's not something that, it's not a declaration. Again, it's not a declaration, it's not a joint statement. It's just something that describes what already happened in the past 2 days in Bali, something like that. So, again, we expect you to just share your ideas about the possibilities of this initiative to move forward, and just be relaxed with it. So, because we are not going to create an institutional decision together. It's just a sharing between us. I think that's how I want to put it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patyaya. And we certainly, Michael, I can see that, Michael Traynor, right? I can see that you're a dynamic individual who is
No.
full of, I'll call
Thank you
just
for
one second
that.
here, Cole.
Thank you for that
I just want to say
clarity.
that we're very open to whatever you have to say, and then you may also, I suspect you're very skilled at writing, and that you may wish to submit things for us also, because we take any input seriously.
Thank you, Holman.
Cole, this is Cole Durham.
So, thank you very much, Holland. I'm here, among other things, as president of the G20 Interfaith Forum, which has been running for about 10 years. And I want to congratulate those who have worked hard on this. I know I've spent a lot of time talking with Holland and Tim and about what's being done. And I think it's very impressive. I think all of us have been very impressed with what's been done. I think the idea of acquiring formal engagement group status is an impressive one. It's one we've been working on for several years. We were formally endorsed for that idea by the Saudi Arabian host when Saudi Arabia was the host. Italy last year treated us largely as an engagement group, but couldn't quite move things across the line. And I met with the person in charge of the India's G20 in August, and he said it's unlikely to happen just because you have to have consensus. And that enlightened me as to what was possible. Now, one of the things that's very nice about the R20 and the Indonesian backing is the political power that they've brought to bear, and it will be interesting to see how exactly this goes forward. I just want to say our own group, we refer to ourselves as the IF20, the Interfaith 20, will continue to exist. But we hope we'll find ways of working cooperatively with the R20. This year we basically stood back out of respect for NU and the really very impressive work that they're doing. I have to say, I understand the quest for principles, and I hope that there's some very good people here working on those kind of issues, and they should be pursued. But the issues are also critical and urgent. I know the ones that we are working on are things like the food crisis, COVID, coming out of COVID, preparing for future pandemics, helping with refugee situations, healthcare around the world, women's issues, and one could go on. And while I think it's vital that we have some people at a very high level and a very deep level thinking about those things, it's also very important to be able to work at a practical level, and I would say in a pluralistic way. One of the things that I get in part because of my position as president of the longer standing organization is some sense of resentment that one particular religious group has taken the initiative. I'm very glad they have. This is they've set a wonderful path forward, and I think we can learn a lot from that. But my hope is that we can be really pluralistic and work together, and that is something that needs to be built into the structure of things going forward. And I appreciate the facts of the ways you're working on those things. So I would just underscore some of the things that Schirmacher said, that we need to find modes of argument that will resonate with the people from our different religious traditions. We need to search for the foundational principles, but we can't wait. We need, sometimes some of the best work happens in process. And I think we also need to be really careful. It's easy to talk about dialogue and the importance of dialogue, but one of the things I've seen again and again is people want to dialogue with themselves and not with the people who are often coming from different points of views, and we need to find ways to be inclusive as we work along these paths. So thank you very much, and thank you for the great work that you've done.
Thank you, Cole. On the point, in terms of the concern that some might have about the first R20 being dominated by, you could say, Nahdlatul Ulama and the Muslim World League, it's simply the reality is time was very short. These two organizations have taken the initiative, they've made this happen, and we are involving other religions, but ultimately, as I say, in moving forward from today, we're going to be building a board of advisors from 19 member states of the G20 plus the European Union, and they will represent the world's various religions and the religions that are in these various G20 countries. So it will be an inevitable process that there will be diversity within the representation of the board of the R20. But so we agree with your suggestion, and as James Dorsey said, likewise, this could be an avenue of criticism, and we'll just see as we go forward, how that participation builds out. Others who would like to intervene, Imam Yahya.
Yes, thank you very much for this occasion and also for following already the success of Bali in these 2 days in Yogyakarta. I think this is very much needed to understand and to increase the development of this very noble initiative. I personally agree on the points that Holland mentioned on let us try to agree on principles, start or restart from the principles to find different approaches, different solutions on different topics. But if we start from the details, or if we start from only one specific field work, or if we start from a more comfort zone grammar, I'm afraid that the added value of R20 as a specific new initiative that has invited members from the G20 countries and beyond, religious leaders, religious believers, spiritual masters, experts, teachers, and policy advisors on religion between the secular institutions and their specific dimension of faith. I think this is something that needs to be, if I may say, protected as it has been originated. Otherwise, having been in somehow serving or participating in many of other similar initiatives, this risks to turn in another of the many other platforms where they are in a very efficient way focusing on human rights standards or on specific topics like environment or any other, while I think your approach, and if I well understood, is an interdisciplinary approach, where the plurality of experiences also of religious leaders and spiritual masters can give a spiritual insight. We are not here to agree on theological differences, nor to have a spiritual gathering, but to have the inspiration of different grammars that, if I may say, might be inspired in a common language. And this is something that is specific, according to my experience at least, to R20. And if we start by the principles in an interdisciplinary methodology, we might also propose good answers to the G20 in India, in Brazil, in South Africa, but it has to be consistent with our identity. Otherwise we will be turned into sociological advisors or juridical advisors, which is nothing wrong, but we have to give the advice as we are And this is a great occasion, according to my viewpoint, with spiritual masters from Shintoism, from Hinduism, from Islam, sharing with other believers and other experts how to frame a common answer with a different approach. So thank you very much on my side.
Thank you, Imam Yahya. Swami Mitrananda.
My salutations to everybody. The vision is very large, very high. I would, because we don't have to discuss the importance of it, because all of us understand, we have agreed to it already. What can be the time frame so that we can start thinking what we should do for next 2 years? The goal is too high. It can't be done immediately. So going by the agenda, what the gentleman there asked is, we should look at for next 2-3 years, what should be our time frame. And it's a beautiful suggestion where you said, the dignity of human being. So what is the most important basic human rights? The most important basic human rights, the first point. That should be something common to everybody. Like the basic human right is to live. That cannot be snatched. I have a right to live, and that cannot be snatched. So if we can look at those kind of basics as common things, and planning like how soon do you think the basic human rights, if we look into it, how soon do you think with the religious institutions we would take it forward? So we need to get into the time frame. The discussions what we have here are coming out from a very evolved minds. You have thought about it for a very long time. And then you have arrived upon it. So the maturity of thought here is completely different. So to take it down to the masses and to start, I think the agenda further should be like what we should do for next 1-2 years. The vision is long, but immediate goals for 1-2 years. I think something like that, if we do, we may find a direction. Nevertheless, it's a great attempt. And we'll work for it. Let us see how it goes. We succeed, wonderful. We don't succeed, worth making an attempt. So we should look at the time, next 2 years, what we should do. That should give us a direction. Thank you.
If I may, Swami Mitrananda, I appreciate you talking about that issue, the right to life. I would just like to point out that a number of the religions in this room do not agree on a universal right to life. Literally, we got issues in terms of who has a right to life and who doesn't. And if we look honestly at these things and we look at the history of these faiths, it's just obvious that within Islam, we have conflicts in Africa where there are certain members of the Islamic faith who may feel that people who are not Muslim don't have the same right to life that Muslims have. There might be other religions. Alan Brill was talking about certain extremists within the Jewish faith who have a different concept of right to life between Jews and non-Jews. And so even what we talk about is the most basic fundamental principle. That's why what we're saying is identifying and embracing values shared by the world's major religions and civilizations. We all agree on the right to life, but we don't necessarily agree on everybody has the same right to life. And even that, I think that that's why you're right. We got a high goal, but we also have a very fundamental goal. And this is Pat Yaya's issue in terms of looking at, because even addressing that issue, we could run around and start talking about all kinds of things, but from Pat Yaya's perspective and Nahdlatul Ulama's perspective, this issue of self-criticism and analyzing what is it that's preventing us from being able to give to others who belong to a different religion an equal right is such a fundamental question, and it's something that really is generally not discussed, because in the world today, this is a taboo subject. It's a taboo generally within the religion itself to talk about it, and then it's a taboo for many other people in the world to talk about it unless they happen to demonize that religion. And then they'll talk about how that religion won't yield an equal respect and right to others. So I'm just wanting to mention here, we got some very serious problems that even prevent us from agreeing on shared principles. But
Yes.
I would like to invite Jackie Rivers to speak here.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
Holland. So I just want to say briefly, we had an entire panel yesterday, people suggesting what some of these shared values might be. So if we agree, what we need to do is start with the discussion of our shared values. Why not build on that work? Why not look at what was suggested on that panel, try to come to some agreement about which principles we want to try to excavate and come up with, as Marianne said, the foundations for supporting those principles in each religion so that we have something pretty concrete to work on. And perhaps, as Marcella said, we can go away with an agenda for what we do in the coming year. The issues are urgent, so it would be really important for us to move forward on these foundations of our shared values, if that's where we're starting.
Thank you, Jackie. And I think what you're proposing is precisely what we've been thinking, which is why we created those structures. We also have to realize that all of us around this table, not me, we have two types of people gather around this table. We have leaders of religions, and we have people who are academics and who are experts on religion. And many of those experts in religion are themselves religious believers. From the Nahdlatul Ulama perspective, it's not going to try to do everything it tries to do for the sake of humanity in the context of the R20. The R20 is simply one endeavor of the Nahdlatul Ulama, but they're busy addressing this issue of the right to life and equal treatment of non-Muslims on a massive scale, as kiai-kiai Ulil Abshar Abdallah described yesterday in his panel. And so we would also suggest that perhaps the people who are gathered around this table, we don't have to do everything we're trying to do for the betterment of humanity through the R20. We can just inspire, also think about what we want to do and do many initiatives outside the R20. And then I agree, but then again, we're just collecting ideas here. But I couldn't agree more that the right to life is fundamental. But then how do we get to the right to life, right? How do we get there?
We should pick up the supporting verses from the books. That should be the starting point on the basics. Each religion has to pick up supporting verses to this idea.
Yeah.
And the religious leaders around the world in that particular faith should start promoting it.
Okay, Zainab.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you all actually for holding such a very important conference and focusing on very critical issues. Nowadays, it's not that easy to discuss these values, or we call shared values, as it differs from one group to the other, but on the fundamental level, we have some sort of understanding, and I believe all the religious streams to each other in terms of these shared values. The problem is not our shared values, as we all almost similar in these different beliefs and religions. The problem that we are facing today are the differences and the challenges that we are facing within our own beliefs, within our own religion, as well as the way of introducing it and interacting with people of other faith. So sometimes within the religion itself, one religion, there are a lot of differences and a lot of challenges that people from this one group or one belief and one religion are not being able to overcome it or to smooth it out to have that harmony and peace. So the challenge now we are facing is not only how to talk about interfaith or acceptance or shared values, the important issues that we have, and we have to focus on, and we have to put it as part of the upcoming principles in terms of working in the upcoming years towards reaching the goal, is acceptance, respect, and tolerance. These three values, so we cannot have one and leave the other without being able to reach the result that we are hoping for. So acceptance is a very important thing. Knowing also part of our challenges and the problems that we see is not knowing about each other. And this is a big problem. When we don't know about people of other faith or the faith itself, we get scared as human beings. And it's important to lay down these foundations to be able to reach the higher level. Thank you.
So we're coming to the end here, and Salman Chishti's had his hand up for a very long time. I don't want you to feel that we're ignoring you. So excuse me for taking a while to come to you.
Assalamu alaikum, and greeting of peace. It's been an honor to be here. And the deliberations, especially I second to you what you mentioned about the perspectives of getting everybody here from around the world. In the past, pre-COVID, we have attended many conferences, interfaith dialogues around the world, many academic conferences, but this R20 really brings back that hope of re-engaging not only with the masses, which Nahdlatul Ulama organization, over 200 million active followers, but at the same time with the world leaders, as we hope that it become a catalyst between the G20 in terms of paying heed to the voices which often goes unheard. And as it's coming to India, next year, and we have really, I've often quoted Indonesia and the culture here in many of my deliberations around the world, and how they are similar with India, that we have grown up with unity in diversity, and what we experienced in Bali was truly an expression of what we had heard about Indonesia in practice. So it is an important moment for all of us, and the voices that will go down to the masses, that in the coming 2 weeks when the G20 gathers here, the remarks, the values that are shared here must be paid heed by the global leaders. And I think we are all hopeful that R20 would be that catalyst to the global leaders who are coming together here, and then India and to the world over. So as yesterday, our Indian delegation, all the saints and the leaders mentioned about nature. So as Khaja Moinuddin Chishti has said, that be river-like generosity, sun-like grace, and earth-like hospitality. So learning from nature has always been an integral part. And I would dedicate 4 lines of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi to R20, and the hope that we all are looking up to Nahdlatul Ulama and the organization that will carry forward in India. As baza baza haran chehasti baza, sadbar gar toba shikasti baza, idarga ima na umidi nist, idarga ima umidast, umidast, umidast. Come, 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 whoever you are, come. Even if you have broken your vows of repentance 100 times, come. Our doors are not the doors of despair. Our doors are the doors of hope, hope, and hope. And truly, we commit ourselves with the shared commitment that R20 will be that hope, that we all aspire that unheard voices of civilization and common values be shared with the global leaders. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Alan?
Yes, Uleo, by Uleo.
Thank you. I want to raise two important issues, important for me at least. One is that the serious question that we should address in the future is the problem of persecution of minorities. One of our sessions in the conference is about truth-telling. I mean, there are problems within all of us, Muslim, Christian, Hindus, Buddhists, Jewish, and others. And that's the problem of persecution of minorities. This problem has been framed within a secular framework of human rights. There are many human rights activists globally who advocate for defending the right of minorities in different countries. But I think we need a different language. Instead of a human right, non-religious language to deal with the issue of persecution of minorities, we need a religious language. Because this is much more effective and touching, because we are religious people. Of course, we do not deny the importance of human rights language, but this human rights language is too abstract. it is not rooted really in a certain tradition. And for some people, it is not touching. So we need to address the issue of the persecution of minorities using spiritual, religious language from our tradition. And we should be honest about this problem. Hindus has the problem of persecution of the Muslim. Muslim in Indonesia have the problem of persecution of the minorities, Christian, Ahmadis, Shiis, and so forth. And also in Iraq, Christians are persecuted. In Nigeria, I mean, religion all have, I would say, all religion have the Palestinian problem inside them. I mean, problem of minorities oppressed. The problem is that most of the religious leaders tend to be denial of this problem, citing historical, excuses. We deserve to do this because we are victim of certain historical background, and this is not helpful. So, going forward, we need to address the persecution of the minorities using the religious language. And as Pak Yahya has mentioned in his speech and today, this conference is not just 2 days conference plus Jogja, excursion. This is a long-term project, and I think in the long-term project, in the long run, we should think seriously about this. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you very much. Before Sheikh Yahya delivers a conclusion, if I may, our beloved friend and brother from Washington, D.C., Albert Sabir.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah. Peace be unto everyone. I'd like to say we're encouraged, greatly encouraged. Where we've come from and to where we are now, it's all praises due to God, the Lord of all the worlds. We have shared freedom space. There are many nations, many tribes around the globe, but we are one human. There's no 2 types of human. So to establish that oneness and that unity or purpose through what our Creator has given us, that is the beginning of our relationship. Referring back to what the Dr. Shoemaker was saying when his visit to Washington, there was an intrinsic value from the neighbors who rose up when the mosque was threatened. They were threatened by gun violence. We didn't press the neighbors to do this, but they formed a line around the community mosque and said, no, this is a no-hate zone, an intrinsic value, human value. So again, we are one human, and there's some intrinsic value that we have, and we say we need to go forward with what you have begun here. This is great, and you are to be applauded for going forward, but bringing us together. So thank you very much. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you very much, Albert. If I may, now there's going to be many, many more interventions and contributions tomorrow, I'm sure, and I can also invite everyone. We've designed the program so that everybody can interact and carry forward a relaxed discussion while enjoying food and enjoying architecture, enjoying art performances. It's limited how much progress we can make, but we're taking notes. I should also mention we have rapporteurs. We have more than one taking notes of everything, and we're going to be assimilating what is said. So I would just like then to close this session so everyone can relax before you go to dinner, and ask Pak Yahya to close the session.
Yeah, thank you very much for all your contributions in this meeting. And there are, we already, we take notes on many valuable ideas from all of you. We know we have differences, we know we have various things to discuss more, but, we have different aspirations also, maybe. But not all aspirations, are supposed to be fulfilled today. Not all questions are supposed to be answered today. Not all differences are supposed to be settled today. We have more times you know, and we have, you know, it is meant to be a long endeavor anyway. So you'll be here together at least until Sunday. We will have gathering like this more tomorrow and maybe tomorrow, yeah. But it's not just the gathering that will give us the opportunity to have discussion and conversate with each other, you know. You can hang out, you know, on the way to Prambanan and Borobudur and just continue discussing. And it's going to help us a lot if you do that. Again, thank you very much. Please enjoy yourself more and not to be too, you know, you're supposed to have fun here more, okay? So you'll have dinner tonight, you'll have more entertaining moments, you know, to following this. So thank you again and enjoy yourself. Thank you.